Hello, everybody, and welcome in to the Dev Insights Hour. I'm Jay Mack, and I'm joined by a couple of the devs here. You just saw them on the patch notes if you were tuning in live. If you didn't tune in live, now's your opportunity to maybe get some questions in chat and talk to Aggro and Lermy as we go over the most recent patch note that just ended, by the way, 10.11, which, if my months line up, that means we're hitting very close to end of year already. We're midway through October, so close to the new year, and so close to the Smite World Championships as well. You know, everybody's excited for that on the esports end. And with this patch, a lot of new changes came through, or I should say, one big addition to the crossover, Runescape. Gets a few more skins this patch. Get a couple of other big updates to some itemization, some gods as well. Get a little bit of change-ups here. Kind of a little bit of everything in this one. And I think I want to kind of open with, first off, once again, letting chat know if you have questions, ask them in chat, and we'll try and get to them as quickly as we can or as efficiently as we can. But I want to go around the discussion on probably the one that had the hottest topic of conversation from some of the viewers in chat, which was around the Titans. Now, Titans, at least from what we see at the competitive level for SPL, usually not the hardest things to kill once you can commit a couple of people there. We've seen people be able to two-man these ones there. So why some of the changes, at least that were made to it, is it more around like the kind of casuals and rank that this adjustment is coming to them?
Yeah, I think the big thing is that just like with Fire Giant, where if you don't understand exactly the right way to approach this NPC, then it's going to give you a lot of trouble and make doing the things you need to do pretty hard. If people are balling up on the Titan trying to melee it, and you're an assassin who's full damage, you're full HP, your tank is getting hit by the Titan, in hand, and they get hit twice, and all of a sudden I'm a third HP. I'm like, yo, what happened here? And we think that, I mean, you've casted a lot of games that have gone to when three Phoenixes are down and you've got fire waves coming in and the Titan is still a little too threatening to end on in a 5-on-5. That means that it's getting a little bit, it has just a little bit too much strength. We think that this won't feel massively different. It shouldn't, the Titan should not be a pushover. We don't want it to be defenseless in any way. And it's just intended to be a small little tap back into, okay, now I don't have, the stars don't need to align in order to be able to end the game. It can be a little bit more natural.
Yeah, in a lot of games as well, it seems like you really absolutely have to have three Phoenixes down to really push an offensive on the Titan, mostly because of that cleave attack like we were talking about. Is that it just hits all of the either it's the melees, the archers, whatever it is. If they're grouped up, they're all getting hit at the same time because of how the cone functions. So making that cone slightly less big, which again, the analogy that I've been using is taking the crust off the pizza.
It's a good one.
Yeah, it's really
that's exactly how it works, is that we're making that cone just a little bit shorter. The angle is still staying the same. The range is, effectively staying the same that it will aggro to, but it just won't be hitting as wide.
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to end up stealing that analogy at some point just because it honestly fits it perfectly. Here's your slice of pizza. We'll need to go with a little crustless one. We did get a message from chat, or a question there, about the negative CDR. Now, introduced recently this year was an item that I believe is Abyssal Stone. It adds negative CDR if you hit with an ability. Now with Osiris adding another 20%. Messenger in chat wants to know, is there a cap on negative CDR? I mean, I know we only have a couple of instances of it, but is there an actual cap similar to regular CDR that there is for negative CDR?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know, to be honest with you. That's something that, there are a lot of times there are questions that I'd be like, yeah, that's a good thought. I should check in with someone who can look into that for me. And just being totally honest, it's not something I know off the top of my head. I think Abyssal Stone and Osiris alt are now the only two effects that work that way, because Arachne's 2 works differently than either of those. So 40%, you will be able to get them to 40% negative CDR. I'm confident that you will get that those will stack. I don't know.
Doesn't stack with itself though.
Correct.
So 40% is the absolute max if you are Osiris, and there's an Abyssal Stone.
And if you have a Morrigan on your team who also transforms into Osiris, and
those don't stack.
Those won't stack either.
Good.
So the max that you can get to right now is 40%. If we want to introduce more percent negative CDR items, we should definitely clarify if there's a cap or not. That's a good thought.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question from chat, and you've now kind of brushed away the worry of a potential Osiris Morrigan combo just running those two items.
We tested that.
Like, oh man, you just used Fear No Evil. What if it's like on a 200-second cooldown? Yeah, that would not be
imagine?
not be fun to deal with. Oh my. God, like the 80% CDR modes are so fun. If you throw a negative 80%, it's just going to be like, all right, cool. How many hunters did we get in a game mode like that one?
Yep.
I think the next topic I want to go on is around the spicy changes that happened a couple of patches back. We had, I think it was like 10 or so gods that all got some really crazy changes that came along with it, and some that got like some smaller ones in there. A lot of those ones have been nerfed since then. Chernobog, Pele, Arachne, Raijin, Ares, Athena, all have had at least some kind of adjustments to their kits since those spicy changes. But we see with this patch coming out here, Osiris, the one out of still the remaining ones that did get a buff. What was kind of the lead to Osiris versus maybe some of the other gods that also received changes, but maybe haven't seen that same level of play?
Yeah, Osiris was losing way more. Way more. Yeah, that's kind of it. Like he literally, we were looking at the data, and we were keeping a particular eye on all those spicy gods, and I if I remember correctly, Max can correct me if I'm wrong. Max is our stats guy at Innocent Rabbit, I think, on Twitter. He was like, guys, I think Osiris is actually worse after all these changes.
We're both sitting in that meeting, like, if our cameras were on, our jaws would be on the floor.
No way.
Like, there's no shot.
No way. He actually got worse. But, he gets a bunch of numbers buffs, but characters' win rates are really sensitive to character mastery. And so if Osiris players are getting a bunch of they're winning, let's say 47% of the time when they play Osiris, but they play Osiris all the time. Someone who doesn't play Osiris a whole lot is going to come in, and they might play him 4 games in a row thinking, oh, that one was unlucky, I'll get him next time. But it just wasn't working for them. And even for the experienced Osiris players, because that's also something that we look at in that instance, is, okay, well, is it just coming from the fact that more people are playing Osiris that weren't playing him before? But even our Osiris mains weren't winning significantly more after all of those changes. So, that doesn't, I think that it means that we could have been a little bit more aggressive initially. It means we could have maybe targeted some other things. With the direction, there are a lot of lessons to be learned, I think, from when something that feels so incongruous like that happens. But it also, just because he got those changes recently, shouldn't mean that he's eliminated from being able to be put into a good spot. And I think that so far the reception has been pretty good and not a whole lot of people being upset about it. So I'm glad that the community seems to understand that type of thing.
Yeah.
I do remember kind of when all those changes came through, almost everybody's going, wow, Osiris is going to be insane. This guy's going to be played back in the jungle, back in the solo. This dude's going to dominate. And then I go into like every game that I'm playing, like PTS, everybody's playing. I'm going to my casuals for like the first week or so, and everybody's still playing them. And then I just never saw him again. So maybe it makes sense that he's getting a little bit of love there. Some of the other gods that were in the spicy changes that we haven't really seen adjustments with so far has kind of been like Kabrakan, Thoth, Apollo were some of the other ones. And then King Arthur, I think another warrior. I mean, typically, at least from the trend that I remember with some of these gods like this with King Arthur, top end of play, usually really good. The really dedicated King Arthur players are getting a lot of wins. Lower end, maybe not so much. Is he kind of in that similar spot to Osiris, but maybe not quite as extreme right now?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think there's a common misconception that people think that a balanced god will win half of their games. And it's just not true. Yeah, the different gods have different balance points and where we want to see them. And I saw someone in chat earlier mention, if Set is finally doing well in casuals, why is he getting nerfed? And if Set is, let's say in the overall grand scheme, if Set is winning 51% of his casual games at medium to low skill level, then that might not be where he's balanced. And that might be an indicator that he's overperforming, and that when the community is feeling like Set is at his best point, when players are happiest when playing with and against Set, that win rate might need to be 47%. Because of his difficulty, because of the strength of what he does, but it being narrow, whatever. There are a million different factors that determine where a character's balance point feels like it is. And so, yeah, it's, Osiris, when Osiris was his most OP, most meta dominant, #1 pick ban in SPL, I'll bet you out of the 106 gods or whatever it was that were released at the time, he was probably like 80th. in win rate.
Oh, wow.
But he felt oppressive. You know what I mean? So, and Arthur's the same way. There are a lot of gods like that, and there are a lot of gods that if they aren't winning 58% of the time, then everyone thinks they're the worst god in the game. You know, if Hades ever drops out of the top 10 winningest gods in the game, there's a bunch of comments
like an oh crap moment.
Yeah, oh my goodness, Hades is the worst god in the entire game. He's 12th in win rate, you know, whatever it is. So it's just not getting too caught up in the actual number and more about because the community, exactly, because the community doesn't care what the number is, right? And they shouldn't. That's not what they should care about. They should care about, does it feel good to play as this character? Does it feel good to play against them? And so we try not to let an arbitrary number dictate that.
No, I think that's fair. Lermy, one thing I want to go with you about is kind of the discussion around crit. Now, beginning of the season, crit was really good. Spectral got its buff. Crit kind of became not so good. We look at some of the trends in SPL right now as far as hunters are concerned, and it's usually arrow into Deathbringer is kind of the identity, or if you're playing Mercury, we've now seen the start of Rage into Deathbringer. I think it was Adapting who kind of coined that new style of build path for him. So with those items becoming so prevalent and really no change to Spectral, what was kind of the idea of going with a Demon Blade nerf just by itself as compared to like a Demon Blade and the Boomerang, or maybe just the Boomerang? What was kind of the idea around Demon Blade's buff?
So Demon Blade has had its troubles in the past, of course, before it was even Demon Blade at all. It just was kind of, I've been like using this phrase one-stop shop, where it kind of gives you everything that you need. As a hunter, it gives you pen, attack speed, power, and crit. That's like basically all of it that you need as a hunter, essentially. So that item just had the right combo of stats where if they were too strong in any measure of the word, then they were just going to be the best item in the game. It has fallen to the point where this tier 3 item has 25 power, or had 25 power. We just buffed it. But you look at that and you're like, holy crap, 25 power on a tier 3? How the times have changed, especially after the power shifts that we did in a previous patch to, you know, bring everybody down a little bit in the late game. It just felt like this item did not compete at all. And so it's not necessarily that we want crit to be stronger than it is. We just want more crit options to be viable other than the Deathbringer and the Ornate Arrow that we're seeing.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of has just been the sought-after meta right now for the Hunters. Has been kind of those two, and then maybe I think
sometimes Fail Not occasionally.
Fail Not's kind of been the other one. That's for like that was your Martys, your Chernobyls, that kind of instance. Maybe more your ability style Hunter's been going towards that because, man, 20% CDR feels real good. So some of that there, a little bit of crit chance. But one I'll also kind of toss your way, mostly because you worked on this god a little bit. Yu Huang is a question in chat from Phantom, who was asking about Yu Huang and his interaction around the totems specifically, just because whenever you have your Dao stacked up, you can accidentally proc to the other totems.
Yes.
Is there maybe any thoughts towards looking into potentially stopping this, or is it just kind of an unfortunate?
Tough. I think it's kind of a little bit more in that unfortunate circumstance because of the way that the totems are classified as like kind of jungle camps that are just immune.
Right.
So essentially, if we were to just like, there's not really an easy like hook for us to say don't hit this because they are jungle camps. So if I said don't hit jungle camps, well then you're not chaining your jungle camps, and that feels horrible.
Yeah.
Right.
So essentially, it's unlucky a little bit for him. There are ways to work around it, especially if you are positioning in the camp. And as much as I would love to say, yeah, we can just turn it off like that, it's just unfortunately with the way that they function right now, it would be a big rework to how the totems function, which would affect all 127 other gods.
Right.
For Yu Huang, and you know that's my baby, but that's unfortunately just how it has to be.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I mean, sometimes situations like that happen. Just good for, you know, them to kind of understand maybe why some things interact the way they do. One thing that I actually kind of had a question on it, and I want to bring up as a small bit, Breastplate of Valor got its buff, I believe, in the last patch, and then it has gone wild at the SPL level. So I'm kind of curious as to how it's been performing maybe in the casual levels, to why we don't see maybe any adjustments, or is this just a Breastplate of Valor is finally back after such a long time, give it some time in the spotlight maybe?
Yeah, I think, you know, our players are pretty sensitive to a buff and then immediate nerf type of thing, like you said, where it's an item that hasn't been super prevalent and then immediately, you know, killing it as soon as it starts to raise in viability.
Gods too.
Exactly, yeah, we do have to be careful with that. It's also that it came on very quickly in the meta, and you know, it went from, yeah, you know, you'll see one player like buy it to, like you said, we're seeing 4 a game, 5 a game sometimes. And no one wants to. We don't want to use the dev cycle as an excuse, but it is just a reality that there is a deadline where these changes are in by, and then once we pass it, we can't change it, and it spiked heavily
right at the tail end,
right after we locked, and that was one of the, that happens all the time, and that means that we are still we're always trying to find a way to get access to the best data to be able to predict when something like that can arise, and get ahead of it. And this is just
now
another.
More than ever, right? It's like we have incredible data thanks to Max and all of the wonderful stats and spreadsheets that he brings to us. It's literally balance meetings have changed. Like, you've been in balance meetings longer than I have.
Years,
but even since I've been in balance meetings, it's been significant how much of an impact this new data sets that we've been working with and new variables to tweak across those data sets have been impacting what we can do with balance. So like Agro was saying, it has a little bit to do with like that dev cycle just being a little bit unfortunate, but we're always planning for the future. Yeah. So needless to say, this is an item that we're keeping an eye on.
Close eye.
Yeah, I would say very close eye.
You abuse it while you can.
Hey, man. Paul's been doing it for a long time now. Everybody's just kind of catching up to Paul. Is the way that we see it. There's a reason that we always coined it kind of the Paul build, and everybody's just kind of following the trends that he sets, even if it may be a year or two into the future kind of a situation. So it is always fun seeing kind of the innovation that the pros do come up with. Sometimes it hits casuals or ranks first, and then it jumps into the pro. I remember the days, what was it? Benevolence was the last really big problem child that popped up, and it was like a maybe some are more like an action immediate style one, but it is sounding a little bit more like Breastplate of Valor. It's not it's got to be changed. It's like let's keeping an eye on a kind of situation.
Yeah, this is not necessarily a game breaking balance situation on our hands.
No, it's strong.
Yeah, Benevolence was a whole other beast. My goodness.
Yes.
It went from like one, maybe two people building, and that was your supports, to all of a sudden 8 to 10 of them are on the game at a single time. So
yeah, that was a little bit unfortunate.
Yeah, those are the dark times there. I'm actually kind of curious about, you mentioned the spreadsheets that Max brings through. I mean, I've been at a few balance meetings myself. When SPL gets a little bit more downtime, sometimes we jump over and help on there. And I remember, it'd be, everybody's in, you got a few monitors up with, different parts of information kind of coming through, figuring, okay, what's this, what's that? How much more information is now there from Max jumping onto here?
Oh, it's so
a lot.
Nice.
Yeah, just getting, data is, this is something that I learned when I did a lot of data work in baseball analytics and when I was working in sports broadcasting, and I would get really excited about presenting all these numbers and like, oh, it's this and it's that. And a lesson that I had to learn then that is certainly applicable now is that numbers feel like they shouldn't, that they should speak for themselves, that they should be, it's just a cold, hard number on its face. You just take it for what it is. But statistics need a lot of context in order to be actually valuable. And I think that that's the thing that has been the most impactful, is that we've learned a lot about how to get the appropriate context for our numbers. And I guess in more practical terms, it's like, Yu Huang's a good example of, we would have known with how we used to do stats, it would have been very clear that Yu Huang by the numbers needs a buff, but what to buff? That's always the question. And sometimes you reach those and it's like, we don't want to do this, we don't want to do that. And we've gotten better at being able to deep dive into, okay, where is he an outlier on the bottom end of, farm for the first 10 minutes, gold for the last 20, or for beyond 20 minutes, damage against minions, damage against gods, taking these little slices of these data sets and being able to hone in more specifically has been really valuable for us.
Yeah, it's also been a really eye-opening chance for us to take a look at when we can get honed in a little bit too far even. It's very important for us to balance that I guess, of looking at particular slices and make sure we're looking at enough of a sample size to be like, okay, this is going to affect the right amount of people, this is going to affect the right group of people, et cetera, just making sure that we have that other set of eyes being like, hey guys, I know the stats look right here, but when we open it to the wider pool of players, maybe so and so doesn't actually need a buff or whatever it might be.
Exactly.
Now, we did have a question from Leo earlier on who was asking about some of the mage item buffs that we got. So I believe it was the buffs to Soul Gem. I keep forgetting how many different soul items that we have there. So Soul Gem got a buff, and then I also do believe Alternate Timeline got a buff. Is some of this in response to maybe some of the weaknesses of mages in general, or was it just that these items were being kind of under purchased, undervalued a little bit? What was some of the ideas to coming up with these buffs?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, mages are in a pretty solid spot right now. It wasn't necessarily making mages better. It's making the worst of the mages a little bit closer to that spot. So Soul Gem, literally never getting picked up. Actually one of the least spot items in the game at this point in time, which is crazy to say considering
it used to be one of the most,
And then Alternate Timeline, again, was also not very popular, but more popular than Soul Gem, for example. But it's also on the most consistent starter item out of the bunch for the mages. But it's just the less picked up option. It's also less frequent that you're actually experiencing this thing. And we did hear from a lot of players that, you know, I use this item and I die immediately afterward. So we wanted to, you know, give a chance for that effect in particular to be a fun new thing for those mage players to experience, rather than I've died once and then it's the late game when I have this item and I just get hydras or crit and then I'm dead again, right? So not necessarily, again, like we talked about in the update show, guaranteeing that they're going to survive, but a little bit more chance to actually play around this item.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want it to be, you know, you have 2 lives once you hit level 20 as a mage. And 40%, ask any damage dealing class, mage, assassin, hunter, dealing 40% of a mage's health pool late game isn't
that's not the problem.
Isn't too tough.
You know, we'll see, you know, this is obvious, like no change we have ever made or will ever make is, yep, we solved it and we're never touching it again. You know, that if it ends up being too strong, we can easily nerf it in the number, in the cooldown, in the base stats of the item, you know, whatever it may be. And if it still is weak, then, you know, we can assess that when the time is right. But I'm not super concerned that Alternate Timeline is going to be the end all be all, have to have it type of thing.
There's also
Pendulum
just so many
is really
other
good.
competitors.
It's very good.
Yeah, Pendulum is one of the best items you can buy for power in the entire game as a mage. So it has significant trade-off going Alternate Timeline.
Yeah, you do get a significant amount of power from that one. I mean, if any kind of numbers nerd can go through it and really be able to crunch just how much you get from there. So maybe that kind of trade-off value, which I think anytime that we see things like Guardians in the Soul lane, typically it's more towards the Conduit gem style of build. So do you think that maybe with this buff up there now, maybe potential that we could be seeing things like Alternate Timeline Soul lane, maybe from some of those kind of Guardian players?
I mean, it's possible.
Yeah.
I think it definitely does have a little bit of a nod for them, especially because it is percentage HP. But at the same time, they're not making that much use of Sands. So it's kind of a give and take where, like, Sands does have its effectiveness in some places, but in other places it's not so good. Way, way, way better on those mages that don't have consistent access to mana. And that's kind of the difference maker, I think, that will really end up being the case.
Yeah, they go Conduit to help them clear, and Conduit is better clear in the early game. So again, there's trade-off there. And if it ends up being a frustration factor, then we can very easily address it. This is one of those changes that it might end up being too strong, but the solution afterwards is very apparent, I think. So I'm not super worried
about it. This is a short patch as well. So there's plenty of time, even pre-Worlds. Like, I know that's always the question coming up now is, like, we have to consider, like, what's going to be in the Worlds meta a little bit, which does come into play for an item like this. And again, if we want to be ready for that Worlds meta, we have time. So I wouldn't be worried about that.
Yeah, and I know typically, especially around this time when you're starting to get to, you know, patch 11, patch 12, you have to start thinking about, you know, what's coming in the next year immediately for, you know, in this case now season 11, what's still for World. So trying to go between all those different, you know, patches. I know you guys are typically working on 2 to 3 patches at a time ahead of the game, especially if you're working on any kind of god and whatnot. You know, the new year always ends up bringing. So there's a whole lot kind of going on behind the scenes. I do want to talk a little bit about, you know, Uller now. We did see some changes come Uller's way. Did get a little bit of help. I think it was his throwing axe. Gets a little bit of extra scaling. And then the shift on the movement or the attack speed and the power. What was kind of the idea, since I think you had a little bit more to say on it during the patch at that time, Aggro. What was kind of the full idea of making that change versus anything else for Uller?
Yeah, we talked about Uller for a good amount of time because, like I said,
tested him.
yeah, that was one of those. Sometimes we get a lot of testing. We always get some amount of testing on everything, but we sometimes when we have a spicier idea like this, we'll make sure that we can implement it early enough to get multiple tests on it on multiple iterations. And Uller was one of them. Uller is just one of those characters that I think players, he's kind of binary in multiple ways. Number one, people are either Uller players or they aren't. He is, if we break down the class barriers a little bit, he's a physical mage, really, in how he plays. In AMC is very much the same way. I would consider both of those characters really physical mages, more so than hunters that want to focus on their basic attacks most of the time. And those characters are demanding in what stats they want in their items or how they're getting it from their kits. So AMC gets a ton of attack speed from Hive all the time. The stats you get from Hive are like obscene.
Hive is crazy.
Wild.
Yeah, just an insane amount.
Movement speed, attack speed, and HP 5.
Yep, and a ton of all of them basically.
Yeah.
And Uller, he's getting this attack speed from putting points in the ult, but you don't really care about that aspect of it for the vast majority of the game. You really want power because you need your combo to stay relevant throughout the game. And we've had to nerf his early clear, his early kill potential so many times. And even when he's at his best, every cast you've ever heard from Uller, an Uller game is, well, they have an Uller, so they're going to dominate early, but they're probably going to fall off late. And that type of stark contrast is only enhanced if you aren't the best of the best and actually getting to start the game with a huge advantage because you're playing Uller. So there are lots of characters that have problems like this, and they aren't even necessarily problems, but they're challenges that these characters face. And we're always trying to think like, can we, especially for gods that are difficult to play, can we maintain their skill expression? Our community is very sensitive to making characters too easy that are considered hard, and that's something that we weigh very heavily. But we also don't think that you should. Let's say you're a huge fan of Norse mythology, you find Smite, you're like, oh man, I love Uller's lore, I love his story, I can't wait to play him, but man, I lose every single game on Uller. Like, that's going to really kill your excitement for the game. So there is a floor that we want to reach.
It's mostly about the accessibility of the character more than anything. We want to give players a chance to learn how to do that high APM action gameplay, right?
Right.
But for a lot of people, again, that difference between a person that knows to activate 2 before using abilities and that doesn't, that difference is humongous.
Yeah, it's a lot of scaling that you're losing out on. So, we were just kind of like throwing some stuff at the wall, and what if we just swapped this and saw how it felt? And we were, at least I was pretty surprised at how good it felt right out of the gate. Yeah. We had to make a few adjustments to some numbers and how we wanted to present it and all that kind of stuff. But we are very excited about making a change to make Uller players excited to go and feel how it is.
Yeah.
Numbers, getting buffs always feels good. But if let's say Zeus, the boy, gets 10% scaling across the kit, I'm like, nice, I'm gonna feel good when I play Zeus, but I'm not like itching to go play Zeus necessarily off something like that for me personally. This type of thing, I'm gonna be spamming, I'm gonna play 10 Uller games in a row and just really get my hands on it and redigest how to make the most out of it, which I think is really fun.
Yeah, I think the coolest change, part of this change, is that flexibility that you can use the 2 in different ways now than you could before.
Yep.
And it still is a very powerful stim. It did get a buff coming from the ultimate to the 2. Both of the stims did get buffs individually. So it's just the ways that you can use it now are a little bit more flexible, a little bit less binary, and being able to use it and switch into axe stance also feels really cool as well. Yeah,
it's felt good, and hopefully Uller players out there like it. if they don't, then we can reassess. But we're hoping they'll be excited about it.
Yeah, always trying to find that balance and fluidity on stance changes is probably the hardest part. Like other characters, like, okay, it's easy. You got 3 abilities in Ultimate to go. At stance changers, you have 6 abilities or more that you have to juggle constantly through, and then you take God like Merlin, who's got, essentially, I guess you can kind of call it 10 just about, because he has...
Yeah.
Close, yeah.
No, he has 3, 6, 9, 11, just because Flicker's the same in every, and then the stance swap there, but still so much with that kind of one. I want to talk a little bit about Soul Eater. We did see a nerf come this one. I know that as far as maybe meta has been concerned when we talk about, the assassins versus the mids in meta, and a question that was brought up a little bit earlier is when deciding the changes to Soul Eater, was the revert to flat pen maybe a change for discussion that was added earlier, or maybe just in general, what was kind of the idea around this Soul Eater change versus something else?
Honestly, no. Just because this item was always intended to be an early game item. It is something that you pick up early when you want sustain. And so it kind of does play into its early game synergy that it does have flat pen, and it also contributes more to that assassin-y feeling of I want to get this on assassins, that it combos with their class passive very well, that it just is a lot of what you want to see on those characters early.
Yep.
So if we remove that, it kind of, mixes it up a little bit in that way of like, do I buy this early? Do I buy this late? And we just really wanted to maintain that core early game identity, but just push back the time that you're getting it a little bit later. We felt like the strength of the item was in the speed that you're getting it, and not necessarily the actual item itself.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
Okay. No, I think that's very fair. Just so many different things you have to always consider with an item, and with how strong it's been, I think maybe we kind of now see where the assassins really lie, because really it was like 3-4 major abusers of that one. It was Pele, who would always work kind of synergistic with hers. Kind of feels like she might still pick it up. Set was one that was kind of popping out. Camisats as well. So
yeah, and it is a nerf to all of those characters.
Yeah, it will effectively nerf all of them. It'll take a little bit longer to get that online. So I'm curious to see how it does change up, especially with it changes some of the magical items as well. And I guess that kind of pushes me over towards maybe some of the topic about, mages and assassins right now. Has that kind of been under the radar from you guys as, watching maybe the SPL or the high-level competitive has been watching specifically around mid, because that's where the biggest change has been, kind of has been maybe that balance of assassin versus mages?
Yeah, it's something we've been keeping an eye on. There was one weekend where it looked like it was, 2/3 mages, 1/3 assassins, and then the win rate for the assassins were all really good, and I was a little worried, like, it might start to, if assassins overtook mid lane mages in play rate at SPL, I think that would be something we'd want to make sure that we want. But as a whole, I think last weekend, if I remember correctly, shout out Blues Ultra, the best little infographics. If I remember correctly, off Blues Ultra's sheet, it was like 70% mages, 25% assassins, 5% hunters, something along those lines. But it was pretty solidly mages, then assassins, then 1 or 2 hunters. I'm, as a disclaimer, this is my opinion. This is not reflective of what we are going to do long term or anything like that. But for me personally, I think a balance like that is really cool. I think that this is not the only year people could have been playing assassins in mid. This could have been a thing for 10 years.
I've heard the aggro spiel before about the chalk mids even.
Chalk is a mid laner. Yes.
I mean, you date back to the earliest eras of Smite, and anytime that something other than a mage went to mid, pitchforks were coming out. They're like, why are these hunters in my mid lane? Everybody wants it to stay traditional. I agree. I do like the healthy kind of split where it's primarily your main class kind of going to that one, but then having kind of the other ones pop in there. I did pull up the sheet. It was 70% mages, 30% for the rest of them, and one of those was a Erlong Shen at one point that kind of popped in. So we had that. I think Soul Lane.
I thought that was sick. It's so cool. If they're gonna play assassins in mid, play the thing that beats it, and it's Erlong. I think he did great.
And it was working well. I look at some of the other ones, 50% warriors for Soul Lane, then 50% just about everything else. A couple of mages in there. Raijin was one of the mages that popped up, which has been crazy to see maybe his path over that direction. And then the only one that doesn't really surprise me as far as, exactly where it's laid out is like almost 85% Guardians in the support role. And then like Afro and a couple of warriors. The one warrior that's out there is just because of Aurora Guan Yu support has been a thing. He loves it. I don't know what it is. Aurora will find something he really likes and he will play it. I remember at the beginning of the year, we were doing the fantasy stuff. He played like 3 games of Ganesh, and I walked out and said, man, what's up with you and Ganesh, man? Fantasy's coming around. It gets real good when you get some kills, and that god can't get kills as long as you're doing stuff. And he just walked out and said, it's the year of the elephant, bro. And
he's been right.
And 6 months later, he's winning Masters with that god. So if someone comes out and says this is their year, I tend to believe it there. We did have another question from our chat, seeing if I can pull that one back up right now if they got me for the moment, which was about utility mages and maybe the idea around reclassification for those ones. You look at some gods, I think Thor was one example, who was a warrior way back in the day, got turned to assassin. You've had some gods like Robin go from warrior to assassin, similar to Nemesis. So for these gods that are being primarily played kind of in that more guardian or support-esque style of role, what's kind of the idea around kind of reclassification of some of these gods, Lermy? If you have any insight on that.
I have like you said, a very strong personal opinion about this topic. I'm going to end my soapbox for a second, and I apologize.
It's yours.
This is my personal opinion. This does not necessarily reflect the other designers or the company as a whole. I don't like the idea of reclassifications. I think it is a very heavy-handed change for something that doesn't need to be so heavy-handed. The whole idea of being able to play characters wherever you want, regardless of their class, I think is very valid. And I think it's also valid to kind of want the stats that you get for free on Guardians, on characters like Nox and Afro. But that also kind of takes away from the uniqueness of picking Nox and Afro, where they get that extra power, where they get all of that other things of that nature. I think it kind of removes that niche a bit from mages, and yes, there are a lot of mages, but there's also so many ways that you can play mages as well. You can play supportive mages, you can play dive mages, you can play mage assassins, all of these different things. And I think that stats really shouldn't change that. And that's really all you get from changing classes. Maybe access to a couple items here or there, but Guardians don't really have anything unique that mages don't. It honestly doesn't change that much for me, and I feel like it's not a necessary thing for us to do. But again, that's my soapbox. I'm hopping off the soapbox. That's where I stand.
For me, if 75% of Nox's games were in support, we would probably seriously consider class shifting her. Erlong Shen, everyone thinks of him as a jungler more. The majority of his games are played in solo across all skill levels. So, if a kit really isn't working, and we feel like it is important to help clear up their character identity, I think it can make sense. I think Robin's a good example of that.
But that was also the last one, and that happened, 8 years ago?
A long time ago.
Yeah, that was way back.
Yeah, it's been a long time. For me, I'd say it's I wouldn't say never type of situation, but there is cost to doing it, like Lermy was alluding to, and like she said, I think playing Afro support, part of the charm of it is that she's not in the Guardians tab, and if she's in the Guardians tab, is it just as fun playing Afro mid if she were a Guardian as it is playing Afro support as she's a mage? You know what I mean?
That's fair.
I don't know that it's always one-to-one in that way.
Yeah, because I think that's one of it maybe kind of rooted in the question was the more so like identity. Like a new player jumps in, they see a mage over in support role. They might not kind of see it there, but that's on like the community to kind of help out, being able to look things up and kind of find that identity there. So
that's just part of the fun of Smite as well, is being able to try anything in support or anything in solo. Like who cares what class it is? Yeah,
exactly. And look, if Afro's win rate in mid was 20% and her win rate in support was 70%, then we would have a big problem on our hands for that. And again, same Erlong, Afro, name whatever god you want. If
there goes to like Najas or
Najas or Ket, their win rates are not spiking super hard in their off meta roles. And if they were, then I think that would be a bigger issue. And I agree that we want players to be able to, who are coming in and seeing it for the first time. We don't want to give them a losing hand to win their game by, taking Afro in the mid lane. you're significantly less likely to win than in support. That's not the case.
Yeah.
If it was, we would want to address it though.
No, I think that's very fair. One thing I actually kind of wanted to bring up as a discussion was, so too long ago, we had the changes to protections and damage kind of across the board. You get less protections and less power, more so kind of on the power end. One thing at least I noticed with a couple of gods that are very niche situations, because not too many gods get, free protections or free power. But what was kind of the idea of not giving the nerf treatment on power to the gods who get inherently for free, such as I think Scylla's one of those who gets the 100 free power, compared to just maybe just leaving it there. What was some of the thoughts on not adjusting the individual gods compared to just like the items and such?
Yeah, I mean, generally we did adjust them on the characters that like were outliers at that point in time. Like I think Fenrir was one that at the time was like a really big deal, that he was keep getting all this huge amounts of power and attack speed and things like that. So on the characters that were relevant, we did do that. On the characters like Scylla, who at the time not meta at all, did not get adjusted, because if we did, we go, why are we nerfing Scylla? Scylla's already not playable at that point. But it's things like that where it's kind of a situational change to whichever character really needs it at the moment. Like if a character needs a nerf, that will be the first thing that we look at, right? It's like, okay, they've had this for a long time. Is this what's making them good? Or is there some other problem that we need to go for?
Exactly. Most of the characters who have power built into their kit, it's there for a reason. It's a stat they care about a lot, and they were already losing it in their item build. So if we double hit them, like Lermy said, if they were really strong already, or someone like Fenrir who has a power stim, but power usually isn't his most important stat or one of those most important stats, then it's more I think more palatable to eat that nerf. You're losing a stat you care about in your item build. We don't want to make you feel worse across the board unless you're overperforming.
It's really just been the characters that have deserved it at the points in time when we've done it.
Yep.
No, I think that's very fair. I mean, like you said, we weren't really seeing a whole lot of Scylla before, so it didn't make sense to kind of double dip into that instance there. Do want to kind of pull away from the balance and just kind of talk in general on the RuneScape stuff. So we got new RuneScape skins that came in, 3 new ones. I believe Bologna gets one. It was also Amaterasu and then Ymir. What was, I don't know if you guys really had a hand in like the process of designing any of the aspects of the gods themselves, but do you have maybe some insight onto why some specific gods were given those skins, and maybe just like some of your exciting parts throughout like the design of these gods?
Yeah, I think in general, a lot of that was clumsy.
Yep.
Had worked through most of that.
He's the RuneScape main.
We might not have the best answers for this, but I know a lot of the time he was talking to us about like that process of like finding the right characters for these RuneScape kind of like personalities and who sits there. So I know way back when we would talk about Bologna, the old Bologna skin I think was mostly because she like kind of fit that archetype of being able to show off just a lot of the really classic weapons in RuneScape, and especially the armor as well. Just being able to be kind of a bit of a player character almost is something that I think was really important for us to include, to just show off all of the customization that people can do in RuneScape, especially with the expressive nature of the capes as well. Having just that kind of feature there for players to interact with was really, really important to us.
How many capes are you currently at, Lermy? I think that's it.
I'm at 60 out of 69.
Wow. And I didn't even realize there are almost 70 capes.
Yes, there are a lot of capes. It is very, very challenging. I remember when we were initially doing this, Clumsy would come to me and be like, hey, so we're thinking of doing these quests for the capes. Are these reasonable quest numbers? And I remember being like, maybe this one we should take it down a bit. This one we should take it up. Like he was basically saying, how many games would it take? Yeah. And so the number that I calculated was over 2,000 to get all the capes.
Wow.
And so for me, I have 60. 60 sounds like a lot.
It is.
But you have to play over 300 games of each class to get the capes, the like class capes.
Yep.
So considering that, 60 is not actually that many.
No,
I'm like maybe 70%.
Look, that's what RuneScape's about, right? It's the grind. It's the grind. Like that's what people love about RuneScape. So we wanted to preserve some identity there for that.
No,
it's about the grind.
There's a couple of, I can't even remember the name of the channel. There was a RuneScape channel that recently I kind of like fell into just by having said, oh hey, we get RuneScape in the game. I was like, I'm gonna take a look back at RuneScape. I used to play a long time ago, kind of see, and I'm watching things about like the grand exchange market at that point, like how the rates have changed there, but then also like percentage of like people who have completed X dungeon or like all of these like what a clue scroll kind of thing, like seeing those, and I'm just sitting there like there's only like 50 people in the world who have ever done something like this, and the games have been out how long? I was playing that in like 7th grade, so that dates me back way too far back than I want to admit my age there. So it's always exciting seeing the crossovers kind of come back. I know we've been getting a lot of the Avatar ones that have popped through. Now getting some more of the RuneScape. I think we got the second Magic one that passed through not too long ago.
Little Garrick.
So I think I asked this the last time that we got a big crossover that popped through, but what are kind of your dream crossovers to pop through, maybe as a next potential?
Oh no, that's so hard.
Obviously, to the community, these aren't happening just because we say they are. This is just what kind of what your dream one would be.
Opinion.
Yes.
What you would love to see as your next crossover. I'm going to give you a little time to think, Lermy.
I gotta say Jujutsu Kaisen.
Yeah, it's gotta be.
It's gotta be.
I mean, it's been going so crazy. It's my favorite anime. I think that one would be really sick. Yeah.
It's just so stylish too.
Yep.
Like a lot about it. It's just very fun.
Yep. Very
lighthearted, but also deep sometimes at the same time. But I just love the characters. I think the character personalities are incredible.
Yep. They're the best. Yep.
I think this is now my double knife from y'all of go watch the show to me, because I've only seen I think 3 or 4 episodes of the show.
You gotta watch that.
I need to get back on it. I guess the answer for myself, I'd probably say Yu-Gi-Oh, just to have like another card game theme one.
That's a good shout.
I remember when I used to do the stream slots on the channel. We'd have some downtime, say, hey, go stream for a few hours on the Smite Game channel. My favorite thing to do, like when chat's a little slow, is be like, hey guys, what do y'all think of this as a crossover idea? And then you just let chat go for an hour.
That would go crazy.
True.
Like you give them one idea and they're like, yo, we could do this and this and this, and they'll give you 100 ideas and you're like, I mean, it's probably not gonna happen, but hey, that's a cool idea. So, but Yu-Gi-Oh was always one that I popped in there, just being able to see like some of their iconic characters. Immediately, I think like Yugi and like Yugi usually popping in Seto Kaiba as an idea.
Of course.
I think someone actually mentioned one time Seto Kaiba as Fafnir, where he transforms into the Blue Eyes White Dragon. I was like,
that would be a Kaiba thing to do.
I was like, that's such a wild idea.
Short. He's so short, and Kaiba's so tall. Like that's like his
like
physical defining feature. A
little chibi Kaiba. I don't know.
Yeah, it would be cool.
Like Yugi and Exodia for Hera's to some extent, kind of thing would be cool. I was like, oh, that'd be sick. But
yeah, that would
anyways,
be cool.
I think that's about all the time that we have for Dev Insight. So if there's anything else that you maybe wanted to say out towards the community, towards this patch, maybe some thoughts and feels around this patch, kind of moving forward.
No, nothing in particular. A lot of questions that I saw about reworks and all that kind of stuff, and we have talked a lot about the idea of reworks and all that kind of stuff pretty extensively in the past. I think did we talk about it on our podcast episode that we did for the Titan Forge podcast?
I think we did it at some point, and I got in the soapbox there as well.
Yeah, that's just how it goes. But either way, just wanted to make sure it felt like it's not a topic that we want to ignore, but it's just a topic that we can never say anything about because we never want to say.
Never.
Yeah, we never want to say never on a character, right? And we never want to go, we're reworking them at some, soon TM, because then it just opens up the floodgates. If we do reworks, then they will be surprises, is basically the way I want to put it. We're not saying we're doing them. We're not saying we're never doing them. But it is not something that we're, ever going to be able to talk about ahead of time, really.
Yeah, I mean, that's typical of a lot of kind of balanced stuff is, you're not going to make the discussion changes immediately. It's kind of the idea of it, maybe like, hey, if this maybe happened, what could be a potential with it, but never kind of that hard matter of fact. Anything else you had to kind of add to the end here, Lerman?
Yeah, it can kind of get like a little too many cooks in the kitchen too sometimes about it, which understandable for sure, but people are very passionate about certain characters, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we're doing what's right for us, just like holistically in terms of the game and how it's actually played, including the resources that we have to manage on top of that. So it can get to be a lot. In the meantime, though, we do want to keep doing more spicy things. We think the spicy stuff has gone over really, really well.
Agreed.
So hopefully, every patch here or there will have, 1, 2, 3, who knows how many spicy changes coming your way, but we are very happy to do more of this.
Yeah, we got lots of spice still in the cabinet.
Yeah, spicy changes get a 2 thumbs up from me. I think I got a lot of thumbs up from the community. So thanks so much, Aggro and Lermy, for your time here on the Dev Insight Show. Thank you all to everybody who tuned in to watch. If you're watching this live, thanks so much. You have a great day. If you're watching this over on YouTube, well, I also hope that you have a fantastic day, and thank you so much for watching. That's all we got for you. We'll catch y'all next time.
Bye.
Peach it.